Well, did we expect anything different? Probably not, right? We'd be foolish if we did. Another 20-3 loss to the Chargers. Same old story. We got the defense out there performing. We've got the offense stinking up the joint. And what can I say about the game, right? You know, another 2 weeks and we'll be on to greener pastures. Welcome to the Riding the Bench Coltscast. If it's your first time here, this is the third episode. This is a podcast made by a Colts fan for Colts fans. I'm your host, Justin O'Fiora, recording from my bedroom studio. You see my bed back there, about, a 6 out of 10 on the MAID scale. So if you are a Colts fan, looking to help out a Colts fan, shoot the video a like. That helps the cause tremendously. Helps it to get more people, YouTube algorithms, and buzzwords like that. As for subscribing, I'd be grateful if you did. Please make the decision as you wish. Don't feel pressure. Watch the video. If you enjoy it, subscribe after. But if you're interested in weekly Colts content from a fan that's giving their most honest and objective take possible, not trying to give in to the overreactions, then subscribing might be something you want to do. Hint, hint, right? So I could, if you want, continue to talk about the regular season games. But as I said at the top of the show, this is just the same story. It's the same team. And I mean, to be honest, I shut the game off yesterday. I almost shut the game off after the 4th and 1 QB sneak and ultimately decided to watch Austin Eckler score a second touchdown on us. And that's going to continue to be the case, guys. And at this point, despite the fact that we were only mathematically eliminated last week, this thing has felt like it's been over for quite some time, right? So for me, the way I'm going to move going forward is just let's get into the offseason, right? Let's stop talking about the regular season, all right? We don't want to hear it anymore. And when I say we, I mean me. And I assume that's how you feel as well. So today I want to talk about, what we have going on this offseason. We need to be very careful this offseason, right? Obviously, the future of our quarterback position should be decided, as we all expect, this offseason. You have the rise of the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be a legitimate threat in this division for years to come. Ballard's job is on the line. If you want to hear what I think about Chris Ballard, I'll probably, put a little card right here or right there. And you can click that if you like, but there's a lot on the line. The decisions that we make this offseason, in my opinion, are going to shape what we see out of this franchise for the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, I've been a fan now since 2002, 2003, call it 20 years. And without question, this is the most important offseason that I've ever seen this team face. So I really want to start kind of opening up and seeing what can we do here, right? So number one, we need to discuss what are the best realistic scenarios for the Colts at quarterback headed into this next season, right? There's a lot of things about the draft. We assume we won't roll with Matt Ryan going forward. If we do, I think maybe we all have to boycott, right? And then on top of that, what is the best course of action to take with this coaching staff? You know, there's a lot of talk about the head coaching vacancy, but let's not forget we don't have an offensive coordinator, right? So there's going to be a lot of overhaul on this staff. And the question becomes, how can we ensure that we have a staff that's ready to win games next season, not in 2 or 3 years, next season? This was a team in the Colts coming into this year that most people viewed as a contender. And in terms of the roster and what we feel about a lot of the players in place, at least for me, not much has changed. There was really bad quarterback play and surprisingly underwhelming offensive line play, which we've seen level out a little bit as the season has come to an end. So I don't think we're as far off as people think, but I do think this offseason sets the tone. So without further ado, why don't we just get into that quarterback situation, right? So when we look at the draft, we could start there. The Texans are going to be number one, and we assume that they draft a quarterback. So as far as trading up, maybe that wasn't a thought, but trading up is not going to be an option. We have to wait and see who it looks like the Texans are going to draft. And we're a little early on that front right now, but I assume as we get closer to the draft, there's going to be some intel as to maybe who the Texans are looking at, so on and so forth. But what's good news for Colts is that the teams ahead of us, as it currently stands, at least as it currently stands, a few days ago, I haven't really checked, but the teams that are in the mix for those top 5 picks like ourselves, not many of them really need to be drafting a quarterback. And we're pretty fortunate on a year that there's like a strong quarterback class, or we're considered to be a strong quarterback class, that this is the case, right? So, of course, as I just said, you have the Texans at number 1. And we assume they'll draft a quarterback unless, I don't know, they really love Davis Mills, but I just can't imagine it. The Bears just invested in Justin Fields. They're up there. The Seahawks have the Broncos pick, right, from Russell Wilson. Not only do they have a pick wherever the Broncos fall, they also actually have their first rounder. So the question becomes with the Seahawks, if they were to draft a quarterback with the rise of Geno Smith, would they want to draft one in the top 5? Or maybe they would want to wait till their first round pick that likely is going to fall somewhere between, 10 and 15. The Cardinals, they obviously just paid Kyler Murray, so they're not going to draft a quarterback. And then the Lions have a pick from the Rams. They've been pretty vocal about the fact that they want Goff to be their guy going forward. So, then we come into the Colts situation, right? Unless the Saints find a way to tank it out and maybe they want to move up. But you're really looking at the Texans and the Colts in terms of these top 5, 6 teams that really need a quarterback. So we're going to have options on the table for us, most likely, barring any tomfoolery, right, in the draft. So I want to kind of go through what I view as some potential fixes. And when I say potential fixes, full disclosure, I pretty much just mean what I would like to see. Fair? All right, so let's move into it. Option number 1 for us. This is the cute one. This is the one that's me using my little GM brain and thinking I'm smart, but ultimately it'll be up to you to decide whether or not this is even a good idea. How about this? Instead of drafting somebody, how about we trade for Jordan Love? We'd acquire him in the 4th and final year of his rookie deal, pending the 5th-year option. When I look at a Jordan Love, the trade that I'm looking at as to what it would take to get him is what the 49ers got for Jimmy Garoppolo back in, 2017 or something like that? They essentially traded Jimmy G for a future second-round pick. And now maybe for Jordan Love, things will be a little bit different. But when you talk about what people expect from him as a quarterback, where he's at in his career as compared to where Jimmy Garoppolo was at when he was on the Patriots, this is a very similar spot. And when you look at the fact that the Colts have a pick in all 7 rounds of the draft for the next 2 years, barring a conditional second from the Wentz trade, I know Wentz might start the end of the season. I don't think it's going to end up being 70%. So I think that's just a 3rd rounder this year. For those of you who don't know, in the trade with Wentz, I'm not going to assume, I guess. Assuming Carson Wentz played 70% of the snaps for the Commanders this year, Washington gave us a 3rd rounder that could have been a 2nd rounder in that scenario. Ultimately, it doesn't look like that's going to end up being the case. But let's just say, right, we give a pick, maybe a 2nd rounder next year, and then we sweeten it with, maybe the Packers would like Kenny Moore. You look at Kenny Moore, who was holding out in the beginning of the season, right? And then you look at the fact that next year is his contract year, and you just saw us perform pretty well in the first half against, I believe, the Vikings. And we all know how that ended. I understand. Spare me. Don't feel the need to correct me. But the secondary played pretty well in the first half without Kenny Moore, and you wonder if a future second and a Kenny Moore could end up just landing as Jordan Love, right? Well, I mean, if that would be the pick, maybe it would be a 2nd rounder this year. But, I'd be starting with a future 3rd rounder in Kenny Moore and then going from there. In the case that they wanted a pick, they being the Packers, this year, we'd have to be firm, in my opinion, with a 3rd rounder, not a 2nd rounder. So if the Packers wanted a pick this season, I would be offering Kenny Moore and a 3rd rounder. And to be honest, I'm not sure how much higher I could go with that. We're not in a position to give up a 2nd rounder this year. And I don't know. For me, it's just you got to get the talent, right? But if we do trade for Love, the cool part about that is we could look elsewhere in round 1. The world is our oyster at that point, right? Like Scarface, the world is yours. That was a really bad Scarface accent. But regardless, this is where I personally, based off of what you may know about my opinion of Chris Ballard, this is where I would trust Ballard to do his work. Once we have the 6th pick in the draft, the 5th pick, maybe even the 4th pick in this draft, and let's say we have a quarterback in Jordan Love that we believe in. And I'm curious, by the way, what your pulse is on the idea of a Jordan Love, because I know it's still trading for a quarterback, but would it fall into that rent-a-quarterback strategy? When you look at some of the guys we've traded for, you talk about Rivers, you talk about Wentz, you talk about Matt Ryan. these are veterans, right? And Carson Wentz wasn't towards the end of his career, but, he kind of is in a weird way. I don't think anyone wants him. But you have a guy in Jordan Love who's still a very young guy. I believe he'd be 25 or 26 when we get him. And we could potentially move into the future with him. Full disclosure, I did want Jordan Love in the, 2019 draft? Excuse me, a little coffee here. But yeah, so I'm kind of curious to hear how you feel about that type of thing. Do you view that as the same type of move at quarterback? I don't know. For me, not quite as much. Regardless, though, with that first-round pick, you talk about a guy like Kylie Ringo, right, the corner out of Georgia, Paris Johnson out of Ohio State. There's another big-time tackle, Joey Porter Jr., a corner. Again, you have corners up there with Gilmore aging and potentially trading Kenny Moore in this Jordan Love scenario, this hypothetical. Maybe we like one of those pass rushers if we don't keep Yannick Ngakoue, which in my opinion would be absolutely insane. But with this team, who knows? And then another important factor that we look at when we look into the draft, again, assuming we traded for Jordan Love, does Paris Campbell decide to stay? If I was Paris Campbell, I'd be considering leaving. I mean, what exactly have the Colts done to maximize you as a talent? And of course, you've been injured. And the question is, what's your role elsewhere? Is there any team in the league that's going to trust you more than the Colts? And I don't know, but something to consider. So let's say we do something with that first rounder. If we were to trade for Jordan Love, maybe we even trade down. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like that, but if we get Jordan Love, and let's say we're able to take that 6th pick, and then you have a team like the Saints who wants to trade up, they're around the 9 or the 10. So maybe they give you that first rounder and a second rounder. So all of a sudden you end up with 2 second rounders. You only trade down 5 picks. Saints get their quarterback, great. And then we have a Jordan Love, right? But in the case that we traded for a Jordan Love, I wouldn't want to neglect quarterback in the draft completely. I'd want to end up with something else because Sam Ehlinger, to me, I really like. I do think he's good. In fact, I have a Sam Ehlinger is good shirt. Maybe I could have worn it today after the Nick Foles performance from last night. But I'll talk about guys like Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, even an Anthony Richardson. This is all good and well. And for the most part, I tend to like those guys, particularly the CJ Strouds, as I'll get into shortly. And Will Levis, I like them. I think they bring a lot to the table. But there's a guy in this draft that nobody is talking about that I personally believe is the best passer in this draft. Are you ready for this? This isn't like a contrarian take. This is the real deal. I mean this. Tanner McGee out of Stanford has every tool it takes to become a big-time NFL passer. He gets a lot of flack for his athleticism, but I do challenge anyone who says that just to look and really look for it because it's there. He's not asked for it. And if you know Tanner McGee, you know he went to Stanford, which for us Colts fans, maybe a little PTSD. But this is a team that is a football organization that is failing right now. A lot of people think in a few years they won't even have a team there. They're coming off a 1-8 season, and because of that, you have an elite, in my opinion, quarterback prospect that has slipped maybe into the second round. I still think there's a chance he gets drafted at the end of the first, early second. But this is someone, if we were to trade for Jordan Love, in my opinion, that we really have to consider coming for. Because you could get a Tanner McGee, you could get a Jordan Love, and then you get a veteran in free agency. There's some guys out there. I thought maybe Nick Foles would be an option. Please no. No Nick Foles, no Matt Ryan, nobody. But we could bring a veteran into the room, and now you have a Tanner McGee, and you have a Jordan Love. And for me, that's my ideal scenario because between Jordan Love and Tanner McGee, in my opinion, there's no chance that the Colts don't have their guy. But again, that's just me being wishful. So that right there is the cute option that I've presented. Now, option number 2 would be the more traditional approach. This would likely be the approach that most people would be more comfortable with. I'm guessing. Of course, I'll hear what you have to say when the time comes. The more traditional approach would simply be to get your favorite quarterback that the Texans don't draft. It's much more simple. The question only becomes, how aggressive do you want to be in getting him? Do you want to trade up to the 2nd pick and give up some assets just to make sure that you get him? Because again, you never know. You have teams like the Saints, the Giants, the Panthers, maybe even the Jets. You don't know how aggressive they're going to be in this draft trading up for their guy, right? Everyone knows that of those top teams, the Colts are a team with a quarterback. So if you're a team with a pick behind them and the Texans draft someone and you're in love with the quarterback, there's no guarantee that you don't trade up from the Colts, or rather trade up past the Colts or trade up to the Colts pick, right? So we got to be careful there. But for me, I pray with everything in my heart that the Texans draft Bryce Young and we could walk out of this thing with C.J. Stroud. I mean, C.J. Stroud, for those who haven't watched, I know he gets some flack for being in a big school. Whatever, so is Justin Fields. Not that I'm incredibly high on Justin Fields, but I don't think that should take away from the guy. When you look at C.J. Stroud, this right here, if not for Tanner McGee, in fact, let me just say, No, I'll think about it. Point being, C.J. Stroud is a monster, elite pocket passer in this draft with athleticism, and he's smart, and he's decisive, and everything he does just looks like it's going to translate to the NFL. Now, if you're asking for some sort of, you don't get analysis like that from anyone, by the way. But if you're asking for the reasons specifically, one of the biggest things I look at when I'm looking at a college quarterback and how they're going to transition into the NFL is when the pocket breaks down and the pass rushers come in, how do their feet look? Do they get a little happy feet? Are they all over the place? Or are they stoic? Do they stand there? Do they still deliver an accurate ball? To me, in my experience, which is relatively limited, but also there, a lot more than a lot of people, that's ultimately the biggest indicator of NFL success with a quarterback. For me, that's what I always look at. C.J. Stroud has it. And, if we were to draft him, it would just be very, very simple on the front of, okay, we've drafted our quarterback in the first round. Let's move forward. The direction would be clear going forward. I think the team would be able to get behind it. By the team, I mean the players. And of course, there's the worst case scenario, right? As we get closer to the draft, it's possible that we find out that the Texans want C.J. Stroud. And then now we are down to Levis, Bryce Young. And then again, did we trade for Jordan Love? We didn't. The thing with trading for Jordan Love is that there's timing. There's a timing thing going on too, right? Because the only way that Jordan Love would be available for trade is if the Packers, or rather if Aaron Rodgers said he was returning to the Green Bay Packers. That's the rumor that's out there. So he would have to be pretty open and clear with the Packers very quickly. And the timing would have to work out where Jordan Love was in a situation where there was enough time before the draft to work out a package that worked for both sides. So in a situation like this, if the Texans were to take Stroud and the timing didn't work out with Jordan Love, now we're kind of caught with our pants down, in my opinion, because Will Levis, I have to watch a little bit more. Full disclosure, I've watched probably 2 or 3 games. And for me, he looks good. I don't see anything that screams that he'd be a bad quarterback, per se. But I'm not seeing anything elite. And, maybe there's something to that boring factor, Maybe it's something about the idea of him just being a boring, bare bones, has everything you're supposed to have at the position. Maybe that's the type of guy we need. I don't know. So we'd be down to Levis Young and, probably no Jordan Love. That's a damning decision for me personally. And again, in that situation, I would like to take Levis. Bryce Young for me, guys, is not it. That's my big prediction in this draft is that Bryce Young's a bust. That's just me. Maybe you think otherwise. I've seen a lot of people that think Bryce Young might be the savior. But as far as the quarterback position goes, that's potentially what we're looking at right there. And, of course, there's going to be free agents available, the Mike Whites of the world, the Garner Minshews, but ultimately we think we have to invest in someone in the draft or a Jordan Love, right? Are we all there? Cool. Then let's get into coaching. This is an offseason where we need to be very, 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 very careful about what we do. With no offensive coordinator and Gus Bradley and John Fox on the defensive side of the ball, we have to consider the type of guy we might want for the head coaching vacancy. And the question that I have, and maybe someone that knows more about football than me wouldn't have this question, but I'm going to ask it. When you have a guy like Gus Bradley, when you have a guy like John Fox, and both of them are working with your defense, is there a benefit to having a defensive-minded head coach? Or at that point, are you just putting yourself at some sort of disadvantage offensively? Well, I'm conflicted by the question because DeMeco Ryans, the defensive coordinator in San Francisco, former linebacker as well, not too long ago, is easily my favorite coaching candidate. But is he the type of guy that we're going to want? When, will he be able to take someone over from San Francisco's staff, right? These are the things we have to consider because the defense is on lock. for me. And a guy like DeMeco Ryans, I love, brings us into the future. He's a young guy, right? Looks like a leader. Some guys just look like a coach. He's one of those guys. And you just wonder, though, if bringing him in, you're just really handcuffing the offense even more. Like, what does that do for this offense, which has clearly been the issue for us? And, it may suck to miss out on a good coaching candidate for that, but it's something to consider. You have Shane Steichen, the guy from Philly, offensive coordinator. Obviously, they're doing great things with Nick Sirianni, former coach of ours, of course. And then you have Ben Johnson in Detroit. Do I love that? Not particularly, but again, we have to consider where do we need help and what kind of coach is going to do something about that. And then on top of it, who are they going to bring in as their offensive coordinator, right? We assume that we're out of the Sean Payton race, right? I can't be the only one that feels like Sean Payton's not coming to the Colts, right? And then, I don't know. I just don't know. What can we do at offensive coordinator? There's going to be a lot. Parks Frazier isn't the guy. Jeff Saturday has been, I don't want to talk against Jeff, but it's been really bad. It's been not good. And he's done nothing this season to show me that he should have a job. So I don't know. I'm going to dive into the coaches a bit more as the season goes on, but I do want to stress. Let me talk about Jim Harbaugh too, because this is a decision right here in getting Jim Harbaugh potentially that I think has a chance to really be one we look back on and say, I don't know if that was the best hire. And listen, there's no denying what he's been able to do at Michigan, what he did in San Francisco, and his resume as a coach, right? No denying it. Cannot argue that Jim Harbaugh is not qualified for the position. In fact, I won't even argue that I don't like him, along with the fact that he played for the Colts in the 90s as a backup quarterback or maybe even a starter. My thing with Jim Harbaugh is this. How can you complain about how we've handled the quarterback position, getting a bunch of rentals, when you have a guy in Jim Harbaugh that we're not sure is going to be coaching for much longer? Isn't he ultimately the equivalent in the head coaching vacancy of what we've been doing at quarterback? For me personally, I want a guy that I know is going to be coaching for years and years to come, let alone the fact that in San Francisco, the reason he was let go was one, and I wasn't in the locker room or anything like that. I live in Long Island, New York, not San Francisco, California. But there were some reports at the time that the players weren't vibing with Jim Harbaugh, let alone the fact that there was a massive power struggle between him and the GM, who I believe was John Lynch at the time. But now we have to face that here. If we were to hire a Jim Harbaugh, who, with all due respect, or rather respect where it's due, is going to be probably the best candidate on the table for us, you have to wonder how that would mesh with Chris Ballard. And I know a lot of you guys don't like that, but is it asking for dysfunction? Sometimes there's just the writing on the wall. And I was very high on Matt Ryan coming into the season, and I was very optimistic about where we were going to go. Divisional round was my expectation, but I wasn't shy, at least in, I was doing a show with my buddy. I wasn't shy, and we still, this is the Riding the Bench podcast together. This is the Coltscast. He has the Eaglescast. Point being is that on that show, I wasn't shy about pointing out the fact there was a little bit of irony in the fact that a team like the Colts, who struggled blowing leads all of last season, brought in Mr. 28-3 himself, Matt Ryan, and then, of course, we now blow the biggest lead in regular season history, right? Sometimes the writing is on the wall, and sometimes stories and narratives, despite the fact that that's all they are, do come to fruition, and sometimes things are just so obvious on their face, and you almost don't want to give it credit because there's no true X's and O's analysis behind it. For me, Jim Harbaugh has the feel of something that's going to end up being a lot of drama for the Colts, and I just don't think it's something we can have right now. This is just my gut feeling. So as far as potential coaches go, I kind of dip my foot in there, and this is stuff that as the season goes on, we'll get a little more in tune with. But for now, that's what I want to talk about. I wanted to introduce us to the offseason, and then I wanted to go from there. So that, I believe, is an entire episode. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I could do here. Probably not. So if you enjoyed that, please, if you haven't already, shoot the video a like. If you want to hear me talk about the Colts again and again and again and again and again, then of course you could subscribe. I'll be here all offseason cooking up the good stuff for Indianapolis, or at least what I consider to be the good stuff. And if you really, really enjoy it, you've already done both of those things and you're looking for a way to help the show beyond it, if you could just share this with one Colts fan, I mean, if every person that listened to this shared it with one person, we'd grow pretty quick over here, right? So, of course, no pressure, right? At the end of the day, I'm just making it for you to enjoy. But, of course, I have aspirations here as well. So, with that, I'm Justin Alfiero. You just listen to the Riding the Bench Coltscast.